So Chelsea, let's hear it from your point of view. What's it like when you're like, you had your dad who struggled, you had your parents that struggled, you held out for like the perfect Mormon guy, you found the perfect Mormon guy, he checks all the boxes, you get married, you have kind of the sexual discomfort and shame and guilt, and now all of a sudden the perfect Mormon guy starts reading Rough Stone Rolling, listening to like potentially sketchy podcasts and
super sketchy.
Hey, watch it. And then starts coming to you with doubts and questions. Tell the story from your perspective.
Well, I mean, it started out little, like I don't know if he was softballing it. I mean, this was at the beginning. He just said, I have some questions, like, are you comfortable with me exploring? And I appreciated that gesture. And I said, of course, like I feel like my mom laid this foundation of like, we don't need to fear doubt, like questions are good. And so I just didn't even think anything of it. And I was serving as Young Women's President at the time in our ward. And I was just at the church all the time and just doing activities with the girls. We only had like maybe 7, 8 girls, but it was a lot. Like I spent a lot of time with the girls. And anyway, so it was weird because I was like really amping up my participation in church, and I would come home and I could see Nick was welding stuff often for his water jet pack company that he was starting at the time, and he was always plugged in, probably to your podcast, and he was always plugged in, and between our conversations, like every week, like big jumps would be happening, and it was really alarming because at some point I was just like, okay, he would say something about Joseph Smith and I would say, oh, I didn't know that, or I can't really explain why that is. And he told me about the temple because that was such a big thing for him. And I was like, I didn't know that. Like that is really troubling. I was trying to be empathetic and validating, but also keep myself at a distance because like I didn't want to unravel as I was watching him do it. And I remember one conversation we had, this was like in the duration of a year, about our first year anniversaries, when he was like, this doesn't resonate with me. I don't believe.
By 2015, he's like, I don't believe anymore.
Yeah.
So it was full blown. It happened so fast. It was just unraveling, and I was just watching, and I was scared, but also like, it's kind of a shameful thing that I didn't talk to anybody about it. We would just go home and like in our apartment, and he would just be like unraveling. And he was obviously angry and confused and, all of the feelings of feeling like he was lied to or, just felt betrayed. And, but he was very tactful. Like he didn't take it out on me. And I think that was a gift that if he would have, our trajectories probably would have been very different.
Yeah. And I just fully realized that like, I'm the one who's messing stuff up.
At one point, and I was just like crying and really confused because we had a conversation of like, okay, if God can be on the table, we can make this work out. If you don't like Joseph Smith, that's okay. We can like focus on God. And he's like, well, I just don't know if I believe in God, and that's huge. That's a huge heavy hitter. And I was just like, okay, I don't know how this is going to work.
So what was that like for you emotionally? Your Mormon dreams unraveling.
Oh, for sure. I was like, our marriage is awful. Like divorce was for sure on the table. We talked about it.
1 year in.
Yeah. And Nick he did come to me and he's like apologetic. I mean, I know that he kind of like is a victim in this of as he was unraveling, but like, he was like, I realized I changed our LDS plan. Like we had this lifestyle that we both signed up for. We had like signed that contract essentially, and I'm the one changing it. I know that I'm changing it. And he's like, if you want to get out of this marriage, like I support that.
Or I won't hold, like,
He's like, I want this to work. I want to stay married to you, but I know that I've changed it substantially enough that if you don't, I support that. And that was just like a little olive branch to me where I'm like, okay, he's not out to get me. And that's when I started to strip away like him attacking or deconstructing the church wasn't deconstructing me. Like I had to separate myself from the church and watch him deconstruct, but he wasn't deconstructing his relationship with me. And so we had a very frank conversation about we want to stay married or try to make this work at least.
So why did you, so there are spouses that just say, no, the deal is church or nothing. So like, it's either you stay in the church or I'm out of here. Why weren't you, especially because you had other bumps,
right?
Why weren't you just, I'm done? I'm out.
Honestly, the narrative and the stories I've told myself growing up of why people leave the church, or they're like deceived, they're wanting to sin, they're evil. Like Nick hadn't changed. His personality was, I mean, he was obviously grieving, which I could sense, but he was still the same man I married. And I knew that. And he was starting to, like, I would go to ward council and they would talk about Nick, you know, because they talk about people in the ward, and Nick would come up and people saying like the light is gone from his eyes, or maybe we should make him an assignment to get him, like they could just perceive that there was something happening on his end. And just watching like and hearing what people would say about Nick, but then going home and I'm like, well, Nick isn't like mean, like he's not mean or he's not wanting to sin. Like I could tell he was like really intensely trying to figure out what was going on. And a big thing was the support group in Salt Lake, the Faith Again meetup.
Talk about that.
So Nick, did you go before without me one time with a buddy?
So I went. So
Tell us what it is and how you heard about it.
So it's basically a group that once a month they'll have someone present. And kind of like a Sunstone-ish crowd, someone from the church history department will talk about, I don't know.
Tom Christopherson was a guest speaker.
Faithful, intellectual Mormons.
Yes.
Yeah,
People
but who are
trying to
also
make it work,
struggling.
but couldn't talk about hard things in Sunday school. So they had a place like this to go.
Yeah. So I mean, what I don't know that I could give you the best pitch for what the group is, other than it was a room full of very thoughtful people who it seemed like had dealt with these issues and had to really drag themselves through, you know, an ugly realization that everything that they knew wasn't everything, wasn't, you know, just clean and pretty.
And this is like a wide range of individuals. Like, so Nick took me the second time and said, I think you might be interested, because I was still kind of grappling. What?
Well, let me tell. The first time I went was Thomas Worthland McConkie, and he had just written the book Navigating Mormon Faith Crisis, and he started out and did a meditation, 10 minutes, and then just talked through the Mormon or adult development stages and how that just syncs really well with the faith transition, and I felt like I was among kindred spirits, and I just felt the spirit, or I wouldn't have called it the spirit, but just I felt so at home and understood and validated, and that these were like people who are leaving the church or struggling with the church or just struggling with information aren't bad people. These are the cream of the crop, and they're really good people. And so yeah, I remember coming back to you and telling you,
it's like that was like top 5, one of the most spiritual experiences that I've had. And so him giving that pitch
said that to you?
to me, because he came home and you read the book, Thomas's book, and you were just like, he was just raving about it. And so I said, I want to go with you next time, because I definitely I could sense that I needed a little bit more of that empathy, because my only exposure to someone really actively deconstructing was Nick. So we went, and I don't even remember who the guest speaker was. It didn't really matter, honestly, because I was just sitting in the back of the room with Nick, and then I just saw like just so many people, and I'm like, this is so much bigger than Nick. And people were asking very thoughtful questions, and they were like grandparents who were trying to make it work for their adult children, and there were, you know, people our age, there were people who are raising small children. Like, it just completely obliterated the narrative I created about people who were struggling, like completely. Like, it was just like the most.
What's making you feel emotional?
I'm just so grateful that people create spaces, you know, and people have podcasts like you, like create a place where people can explore the struggle and find humanity, you know, and that was such a gift to Nick. And then Nick in turn gave that gift to me. And at the time I didn't feel like it was a gift, you know, I was still really angry that he was sabotaging our family, but you know, it was a big moment, a very clear moment for me that I was like, wow, there's something here that I need to learn.
And to rewind, I think you asked, how did Chels go through all of this and not get defensive and say like, whoa, you're changing the agreement, I'm out. I mean, the answer is that Chels cares. Chels is an incredible empath, and when she sees someone hurting, she, more than defending herself, she wants to find out why that person's hurting, even if the facts behind why that person is hurting is hurtful to you.
I don't want to take away, like, I was very defensive. Like, we fought a lot. Like, our neighbors probably heard a lot. As we were trying to set boundaries, because Nick would just, like, as I started to empathize a little bit more, then he would feel more comfortable of, like, well, did you know this? Or, like, maybe you should read this. And sometimes it was a fire hose. And, when you'd
feel what?
And I would feel defensive, and I would feel like I could feel myself shifting. I could feel like my testimony, like I was still in Young Women's and I was bearing my testimony like every single Sunday basically. And it was changing. And I was slowly, like, the lessons, I was like, I felt like restricted. Like I couldn't talk as openly as I had once been able to. And my testimony just became more and more generic. Like it was more like, I love you and I just want you to be happy, and it was never like, please stay. And actually quite a few of the young women have left the church. And it's been an interesting dynamic since.
So your lessons to the young women got generic.
Got more generic.
You started to question?
Yeah, because I'm like, I can't teach this lesson on Joseph Smith. Like after like talking to Nick about some things, like I was like, I need to do more research, and I don't want to teach someone something that I don't know for sure without like researching. And I knew, like, when there's like the Year of Polygamy podcast, I held off on that for years because I knew if I listened to that, it would hurt so bad. Anyway, so I just like, I held it off because I just knew if I did that, it would hurt and I would unravel. And it's a weird place to be, to like know that there's stuff you don't know. And if you do happen to go in that room, that it could shift things drastically.
And you were holding off why? Say it again.
The church was everything, the community, belonging. I had really good experiences that, quote, I could not deny. There's just a lot that was, my roots were in the church. And
what did you fear? If you let your guard down,
I didn't know life outside of the church. I didn't know that. I don't know. I didn't know what to fear.
You became like the anchor in our family and our future potential children. Like now that I'm out, you're the only thing that's...
This kind of goes into like when we started telling family, and I know there was the idea of like, okay, well, the children are on you now. Like if you leave, the whole family will be wiped off. The family tree.
You that? They put the pressure on you again?
Yeah, I think it was the intentions were good, but yes, it was like if you leave the church, the whole family will be gone. And so there's also the added pressure of like, I don't want to disappoint people around me.
Yeah.
Marriage is hard enough. Like marriage is hard for everyone.
Yeah.
You're dealing with all this the sexual stuff and then all this faith stuff. And it's your first year of marriage. That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot.
And new job, and you're building a career, right?
Yeah.
So we were traveling around the country doing boat shows and stuff. And anyway, that first year was really hard. And I don't want to say like, it's easy to go in hindsight and be like, oh, but I empathized and it was hard. Like we fought a lot. And I don't want to minimize that because we were trying to set boundaries, and I didn't really know another mixed faith couple that was making it work. And so I didn't know what it looked like. And so we were trying to figure that out.
Yeah.